Salam and welcome. Thank you for joining me in part number 4 as we look at the spiritual culture, the spiritual culture, the spiritual culture in Islam in this wonderful book, The Dimensions of Islam, Volume 1 by Mawlana Abdul Aleem Siddiqui al-Qadiri, Rahmatullah Alayh, the roving ambassador of Islam. And my thanks to Sheikh Abdul al-Qadiri who gave me permission, and he is the president of the Imam Ahmad Rida Academy. Please contact them. They are based in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. Try and get copies of this book. There's 2 volumes to it, right? So we're looking at the spiritual culture in Islam, and we're seeing how the earlier great philosophers, scientists, and even today, many nations are struggling with what is the concept of the soul. On the one hand, we have the body, which you can touch, you can feel. That is matter. That is matter. That body is in the earthly, terrestrial dimension. You can touch it, you can feel it, you can expose it to the scientific method, you can do experiments on it. On the other hand, you have the soul, which is in the transcendental dimension. You cannot touch it, you cannot feel it, you cannot take an X-ray of it, you cannot put it through an MRI scan, you cannot put it through a 3D scanner, you cannot take a blood test of it. So the scientists are confused. They say, how do we investigate the soul? Then they start questioning, does the soul even exist? And that is where we're looking at the challenges that previous nations face. And let's look at one of the challenges. And we said that psychologists are coming a little bit closer to a better understanding than other sciences. And we're looking at what the pertinent remarks of Dr. Robert S. Woodworth, an American historian of psychology. He says in his book, The Contemporary Schools of Psychology, on page 2, and I quote, "The past 30 years have been remarkably productive of new movements in psychology, with the result that we now see the curious phenomenon of schools differing radically from one another in their ideas as to what psychology should be doing and how it should go to work. These schools remind one of the schools of philosophy and are scarcely to be paralleled at present in the other natural sciences. Perhaps their existence in contemporary psychology is a sign of the youth of our science and of the vast number of unexplored possibilities that we still have to examine." End of quote. However, it would he's continuing with the quote. "However, it would be utterly wrong to infer that because our that's another quotation. It would be utterly wrong to infer that because our scientists and philosophers have so far failed to find out the reality of the soul empirically means through the scientific method and to collect empirical data, there has been none who has succeeded. The fact is that, to quote a Persian saying, and I quote, everyone has been assigned a particular function and has been accordingly endowed with the requisite aptitude. A logician may be a master of the art of controversy and fully conversant with the techniques of debates, but that will not qualify him for analyzing the properties of elements, for that is the task of the chemist. Again, a botanist may know every possible thing about plants, but surely he can have no way or no say in the sphere of physiology. Those are 2 totally distinct fields. Similarly, the right of speaking authoritatively on the problems relating to the soul goes to those who have been specialized in what may be called spiritual science, both theoretically and practically. What I propose to do, therefore, at the present occasion is to put forward some important and basic facts in connection with the subject under discussion, the light of the findings of these specialists, and to treat these facts in such a simple and plain language that even people of ordinary intelligence and education may be able to grasp. And I love this. I love it when things are made simple so we can understand it. I would also like to lay a greater emphasis on the practical aspect of the subject, and that because I believe in practice and not in idle theories, right? Nature has allotted distinctly defined functions to all organs of the body, which they cannot interchange with each other. For example, the kidney cannot do the function of the liver cannot do the function of the abdomen, the lungs cannot do the function of the heart, and the heart cannot do the function of the brain. Everything has got a separate reason and a reason for doing it. The uterus, no one can take the place of the uterus. The womb is where the baby develops. That's where fertilization occurs. You cannot say we must have the womb in the abdomen. You can't do that, right? And by abdomen, I mean you can't say the womb must be in the large intestine or in the small intestine or in the transverse colon. It doesn't work like that, right? So in the same way, the brain can know and understand material objects and phenomena only, and this because its constitution is through and through of a material that is a physical character. If, however, an idea of something immaterial, non-physical enters the orbit of the brain, it is explainable and understandable only through analogies drawn from material things. So the material things gives us an understanding of the immaterial things. Its real nature must necessarily be beyond its scope. So now we come to the big question, what about the knowledge of the soul then? We saw just now that the physiologists have ransacked the entire body head to toe, but they could not trace in it any material substance in which they could assign the name of the soul. And some scientists have done this. We find some experiments have been done, and I'm sure you read it in the Times magazine headlines and in some research articles where scientists have said, we found the soul. There's a place in the brain called the God spot, and I totally reject that. You cannot find a God spot in the brain because the soul is not something that you can find with an X-ray machine. And the reason why some scientists or atheists will say that no, we found a God spot, there's politics behind it and there's an agenda behind it, because they will say, oh, you know what, if we found a spot in the brain, we can make an operation, we can take it out. So then you don't no longer believe in God. You see the thinking behind them. So all of this is all about politics and agenda. Or sometimes they say, oh, you know what, I can put for you inside your brain a Christian organ in you, or I'll put a Muslim organ in you. There's no such thing as a God spot, right? That soul, you cannot find it in an X-ray machine. If you cut the body open, you will never find the soul, because it is in the non-tangible, the intangible, transcendental dimension, right? So the natural conclusion to which these two facts, when viewed together, lead us is that not that the soul does not exist, but that it is something immaterial. It is in the transcendental dimension, something above and beyond physical reality. You cannot touch it, you cannot feel it, but you know that it exists. Why? With the very fact that you are thinking, as what was it very famous said, we said, I think, therefore I am, right? So that being the case, it becomes evident that a knowledge relating to the soul cannot be acquired through material or physical means. On the other hand, we must fall back upon the soul itself and seek enlightenment from the soul. Now, what course should we adopt to attain this end? How do we go about finding out what is the soul? Because you cannot put it to X-ray machines. You cannot put it through a functional MRI or an MRI scanner or a CT scanner or an X-ray machine, or you're going to take blood tests. You're not going to find the soul like that, right? You can't put a soul through the security machines or this whole body scanners that you find at the airports. That's not going to find the soul, right? Or in other words, what is the way of spiritual illumination and of spiritual knowledge? The way is open and clear. Just as schools accurately planned courses for study and teachers are necessary. So teaching is very important. So teachers are necessary for the training of our intellect, ultimately with a view to acquire the knowledge of the physical reality. It is similarly indispensable to have a spiritual school, a spiritual course of study, and a spiritual teacher for the attainment of spiritual knowledge. Wow, magnificent words from Mawlana Siddiqui. Stay well, look after yourself. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Aleem.